Hello to everyone. This is NewYorkSteelo yet once again with a video, and this time we're going to be talking about WetDry trickle filters versus Refugium. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions online of, I just set up a new system and I put a WetDry trickle filter with bioballs in there. And I really can't understand why people are so stuck in the past. And, this hobby has evolved in so many ways over the years. And for example, when I was in my teens, I remember I got one of the first jobs I ever got was working for Petland Discounts. And I had such a passion for this hobby and so dedicated that I made assistant manager like in 3 months. I left the job and moved on to make more money and bigger and better things. But back then in the early 90s, I'm not that old, people. I'm only 33 years old. So don't get it twisted either. But, back in the early 90s, I'll give you this example as to how this hobby has evolved. In the early 90s, it was thought that the best way to run a saltwater fish tank or even a reef tank was to go as not as natural as possible. And what I mean by that was that the majority of people were recommended to run systems with fake rocks, fake decorations, non-live sand, and it was thought that it was best to run a system this way so that it'll be easier for you not to introduce diseases to the fish. And I can tell you that over the years, people started experimenting with adding natural live sand, live rock, and they discovered that it was easier for you to keep the fishes. And it was because the live rock produces a lot of food for the fishes. And back then also, it was thought that the best filtration system you can have for a saltwater fish tank was a WetDry trickle filter. We've gone through a lot of advances in this hobby, and there's still a lot to be discovered and a lot to learn about this hobby. But I can tell you that I really don't understand why people still use WetDry trickle filters. Now, I don't have a WetDry trickle filter to show you guys what it looks like, but you can go online and just look it up. It's basically the same as this particular sump, for example. Only difference is that you have the water coming down from your main display tank, and it goes down into a filter pad, some sort of a cotton filter pad, and it drips down into wet and dry bioballs. And this is said to be the most effective way to break down organics and turn it into nitrates. Now, I'm not disputing that. I believe that a WetDry trickle filter is probably one of the best ways to run a saltwater fish only tank, for example, because fishes can actually live in an environment where nitrates are between 40 and 60 ppm, although I still believe that you are pushing it by running a system with 40 and 60 ppm nitrates, but fishes can tolerate it better than corals. So in a sense, and to make this discussion really easy, I can tell you that a WetDry trickle filter is basically a nitrate factory. And therein lies the problem with why I don't understand why people still use a WetDry trickle filter when they can have a Refugium that does exactly the same thing as a WetDry trickle filter, and just as good as a WetDry trickle filter in that It breaks down organics, but also it removes, in a more natural way, it removes these organics from your system when you are incorporating a deep sand bed, for example, as you see here, and some macroalgae for nutrient export from your system. So, you know, I mean, for those of you out there that still have a WetDry trickle filter, you know, it's a good filtration system, and it'll be perfect for breaking down organics and turning them into nitrates. But why in the world would you want to have that kind of filtration system when you can have a Refugium that does that and more? You know, and even if you don't incorporate a Refugium into your system, let me just state that live rock I'm not even going to say just as good. I'm going to tell you that live rock in itself is a lot better at breaking down organics than bioballs. You know, I can tell you that straight up, and I'm telling you the truth. Live rock has more surface area than 2 pounds of bioballs. If you take, you know, if you were to compare it, and if you have a fish-only system, which has approximately the same amount of pounds per gallon of live rock, you absolutely do not need to have bioballs in your system. Because live rock, just like a Refugium, will actually work to benefit for you in that it will release food to the fishes, and it'll also, within the rock, break down nitrates and possibly turn them into nitrogen gas, you know, just as a live sand does. So, you know, I'm making this video once again because I've gotten a lot of questions about these WetDry trickle filters. Guys and girls, please, if you can take the WetDry trickle filter and turn it into a Refugium, and I can guarantee you that you will be better off. Not only will a WetDry filter remove nutrients and eat up nitrates, but I have heard of people's systems that can go up to a year without doing any water changes, you know, because everything is so natural and so full of life. And, you know, not only is it beneficial in that way, but it can also become a breeding ground for micro and macrofauna to breed in quantities that, you know, it'll be able to feed your fishes. So you can go for vacation for a week and you will not come back and find your fishes all bony and whatnot, because a Refugium will create a natural environment in which it will remove excess nutrients and also be a breeding ground for this micro and macro fauna, which can naturally feed your fish. So, you know, this is just my recommendation, guys. If you have a WetDry trickle filter, I'm sure it's working out for you, but I would really consider adding a Refugium to your system and just try it out and see the benefits. With that said, this is NewYorkSteelo once again with this WetDry trickle filter video as promised. I've got a lot more videos to come, so stay tuned. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, voice your opinion, hit me up. I'm more than glad to answer your questions. And with that said, this is NewYorkSteelo signing out. Peace.